All right. Now, this next story comes to us from the Useless Things Department. It has to do with the military. I claim the most useless thing on the planet is wet toilet paper. Don't ask me how I know that. Well, but it actually does involve the military. So, the second most useless thing in the world very possibly could be a second lieutenant. And the reason I say that is because these guys come straight out of officer training school and they think they are the hottest shit on the planet. And unfortunately, nobody above or below them in rank shares that opinion. So, when I was in the military, I tried to tell this story to just about every officer I could possibly get to listen to it. Okay? So, it has to do with a French Foreign Legion post way out in the middle of the Sahara Desert. And it's been there forever. It's miles and miles away from any town or village or any sign of civilization. And the old colonel who's been there for years is retiring. And the post is being taken over by a brand new spit and polish, right out of school second lieutenant. So after the passing of the ceremony, changing the guard kind of thing, the second lieutenant gets the sergeant major and he says to him, look, give me a tour of this post so that I know what I got. So the sergeant major says, sure. And he starts taking him around. He shows him the barracks. He shows him the armory, the mess hall, the officers' club, the stables, and so forth. And they come out of one building, and they're on the corner of the parade field. And right there, staked out, is this old, sway-backed, moth-eaten, beat-up-looking camel. And the lieutenant looks at it and he says, Sergeant Major, what is that beast doing here? And the Sergeant Major says, well, sir, you see, it's kind of our mascot here. We're miles and miles away from any town or village, which means we're miles and miles away from any women. And, well, the men get horny. So when the men get horny, they use the camel, and the lieutenant goes, all right, stop right there. I don't want to hear another word. Just do me a favor, get rid of that thing, get it out of my sight. So the sergeant major says, okay, and they carry on with their tour. Well, a month goes by, and the lieutenant starts getting just the mild pangs of horny. 2 months goes by, and the thought of women and sex starts creeping into his head more and more. By the end of the 3rd month, wow, you know, sex is on his mind almost all the time. By the end of the 4th month, he's actually thinking about women, and every once in a while that camel kind of creeps into his thoughts. And by the end of the 5th month, whoa, women and camel, they're about 50-50 going on there. And by the end of the 6th month, that's it. He's just thinking about this camel almost all the time. So he calls the sergeant major back into his office. And he says, Sergeant Major, you remember when we took our first tour of this place? There was this beat-up old camel that the men use. And the sergeant major says, oh, yes, sir. It's been a favorite of theirs for years. It's our, like I said, our mascot. And the lieutenant says, well, what did you do with that beast? And the sergeant major says, well, I put him in the stables with the horses. So the lieutenant says, well, you know what? I think I'm about ready to pay a visit to that camel, so take me to him. So off they go, and they get to the stables, and they go all the way to the far end, and there in the last stall, there's the camel tied up, and he's got his head in a trough, and he's just chewing away on some oats and some hay. And second lieutenant looks around, and well, there's nobody there except the sergeant major himself and the camel. So he looks around a little more, and sure enough, just as he suspected, there's kind of an orange crate sitting close to the camel. So he picks the orange crate up and he puts it right behind the camel's back. And he gets up on it. He looks around, nobody's there, so he drops his pants, he drops his underwear, and proceeds to mount the camel. And after a few minutes, he's going away pretty strong at it and all this, and he kind of has a smile on his face, and he turns to the Sergeant Major and he goes, "You know, Sergeant Major, I'll bet you this is exactly the way the men do it when they get horny, right?" And the Sergeant Major says, "Well, not exactly, sir. You see, when the men get horny, they get on the camel and they ride into town where the girls are." That one got mixed reviews when I told it to lieutenants. Go figure.